Hello, this is Arcades, and welcome to a bit of a discussion video here on Stormworks Build and Rescue. And yeah, so recently the devs did another Q&A, and just like last time, I went through, picked out the questions, or got all the questions, got some summaries for them, and we're going to discuss over those real quick. And yeah, so hope you like what you watch, hope you enjoy what you see. If you do, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment, helps the channel out immensely, and yeah. Let's take a look at these. Okay. As you can tell, I'm on my fishing boat currently, just having some fun, chilling. I may switch out the video for something else, like a little build video for the background, so you can watch and think. But yeah, so because I'm not going to be doing a lot of moving while I'm looking at this, so. And I'm going ahead and muting the sound so this thing doesn't overpower. Alrighty, so. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the questions, and I'm going to give a summary of the answers they gave. I might go back later and try to timestamp some of them, if I can. Some of the questions, so you can go straight to it. It'll probably take me a little time, might not be on initial release, but if you're watching this later, you might be able to look at them separately. So, or I might have it done right away. I'm not sure. Either way, so, now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at this and check it out. As if I'm restarting it twice. Okay. Now, I will say, from what I saw in the questions, there was actually a pretty big variety of questions this time. There were a few repeats. And there was actually not a lot of the typical questions that I would expect. Apparently a bunch of them got answered in the last one, and they were answered. And people actually were putting down a number of new questions. There were some repeats, even from before, but nowhere near as much as the, constant stuff that I was expecting here in the last one, which didn't turn out to be as bad. Okay, so, let's start with this. So, now remember, like I said, this is going to be a summary of the question and answers. These aren't going to be one for one for what they were saying and what the question was asked. So this is my interpretation of the question and summarizing it, and my interpretation of his answer, summarizing it. I would suggest, if you want the full answer, go find the full stream and check it out. This will give you at least a decent idea where to start. I do have a marker for about halfway through, at which question is the halfway point. So at least it'll give you an idea if your question is after that point, you can go there and such. Okay. Alright, so first question was weapon DLC, content, ammo, etc. So I believe the person was asking if they were planning to bring any more weapons DLC content, such as expanding the ammo count and such. But they had... they do have some weapons DLC stuff coming up for balancing weapons, but they don't really have specific content in place. I believe they mentioned that it would be hard to come up with weapons DLC specific content because, it was kind of the DLC. Okay, and I mean, pretty much that's what I thought the answer was going to probably be in that case. I do think, personally, it'd be nice if they did add a few expansions to it, but I don't see anything major, just mainly, like, little additions here and there. Alright, second question. Now, there is, like, a total, I didn't mention this, but there's, like, a total of 72 questions they got through, which I think was a lot more than they got through on the first one. It was, like, a 2-hour stream. Okay, so... wheel physics. Are they planning to make any updates or changes to the wheel physics, especially in regards to grip? Yes, they are planning to, but there is an issue with the wheels, is that they don't have the same conservation of energy that most other moving parts have, like the propellers and such. So it tends to affect things differently, so you end up stopping faster and accelerating sooner, which probably ends up being an issue with the acceleration. They want to be careful because, as an example with the weapons DLC, they don't want to make a major change because it ends up breaking a lot of creation, so they want to be careful about just adding stuff. Especially, there is a number of people who want to see a change, but there was even more people that didn't want to see the change. And they don't want to all of a sudden just come up with something and just be like, oops, now your creation's broke. They have definitely taken the mass breaking of stuff as a big no-no when it comes to the player base. Alright, number 3. Looking to can add a container spawn to the Taijin docks to FJ Warner. It is possible, planning more container missions, but not going to delve in deeper, but looking also into more logistic missions. So, they definitely say they're looking at handling more logistics missions in general, like, moving containers and such. I know that personally, I would like to see them bring in more smaller containers. The big containers are nice, but it'd be nice to see some smaller containers that can be managed on smaller vehicles. Because they got these big containers, and while they're fun and they're great for the price, mostly, it would be nice to have something smaller so that we don't have to build such a big vehicle to carry these things around, or we can use the bigger vehicles to carry multiples of them around. Alright, number 4, officially supporting EXE editing without being banned, as such as getting a warning. Now, it seems like apparently some people have been editing the EXE file. This is not something I've been privy to because I don't normally like to do a lot of modding. I generally do it on specific games. Stormworks is not one of them for me, so I don't generally keep up with that. But from his knowledge, he said, haven't banned anyone yet for specifically editing an EXE file, but online play may have issues. And if you're on a dedicated server, that might cause an issue with the dedicated server to cause you to get booted. So he was suggest to keep it mainly to single player play. Now, as I said, I am not particularly familiar with EXE editing and what it particularly affects, but hey, if you want to do it, you can do it. Alright. Fifth question. Will we be getting crab pots? He has since said that the feedback for the fishing update overall has been really good, and he is wanting to add more to it. However, he doesn't want to add just fishing stuff. He's probably got 1 or 2 more updates planned for the fishing, and then they have other stuff they're wanting to work on. But they are planning crab pots, and as was a really popular feedback request that people have wanted. So. Alright, next one, number 6. Okay. Alright, number 6. Will there ever be improvement to the microcontroller Lua, such as an increase to the character limit? He has seen on the workshop people using inputs to add in Lua script and then bringing into the microcontroller Lua and kind of subverting the 4K limit that way. And he understands this is probably something that was a limit that was more imposed by when they first introduced it, because they considered it kind of similar to an Arduino, which didn't have a lot of room to put such things on there. But he sees that possibly, they could extend it further. He even said possibly up to 16,000 characters is a possibility. And, that was, is a possibility, but he said there's also a thing, if you put down a lot of those with that much, that big, Lua scripting in it, there could be issues with performance later on, especially on bigger craft that have a whole bunch of it. So the thing is a careful balance between expanding that and causing performance issues. Because he's afraid that people will build these in excess and then blame them for the performance issues when it comes from the things that they created using this expanded delivery of Lua. Alright, number 7. What does testing process look like? Automated, or is there manual testing? This one went off on a tangent. There's a lot of stuff. Somebody just basically asked him, how do they test things? And he went off on the entire process, which in the case he says starts off with tracker, and the issue starts off with the tracker and it's placed onto a tracking board, which he mentioned was something similar to Trello. Not sure, haven't used that stuff, so I'm not familiar. So I'm just going to leave it at that. It will create the task to be worked on, sent for testing, and then they start testing it. Tests, depending on the issue and how much it affects the systems, it could be maybe 2 or 3 weeks to maybe as much as 4 to 6 weeks before seeing relevant, maybe something added to a feature or some update based on it. Then they have a whole bunch of checklist process that they go over to make sure the things and scenarios, make sure they fill out all these checklists that say, hey, are we good? We're good. Probably most of those came out because of the space DLC. I guarantee you a bunch of them came out because of that. Alright, number 8. Will there be gimbal inputs for radars for uncaged missiles be added? He wasn't sure what this person meant by uncaged, what the uncaged missile was, but he did think that it was possibly being able to fire a missile without having to actually look at something. So in other words, if the target was off to your right of the vehicle and the missile, when you launch it, it would end up going that way on its own. Or maybe you can aim the radar that way. He wasn't sure about it, and it was kind of a very specific request, but he didn't say no. Number 9. Will we get official support for block and parts modding? Interested in... So yeah, he was asking for official support. If the person was asking if there was going to be official support for blocks and parts modding, well, he was definitely looking into it, and he definitely says that people want it, and he does see the benefit in it. So it's not something they're against for sure, and they're looking at it. Okay, number 10. When will there be more quality of life updates? And he said, and basically just went and gave the person a description on how to look at the Steam page and where the patch notes are, and been saying for the last 2 weeks we've been adding quality of life updates with each patch. I mean, to be honest, to me it feels like even that question says the person wasn't really paying attention to the updates, but that's me, because not everybody reads the updates the same way and considers the same quality of life adjustment equal in weight to what another person does, even including the devs. So I can see somebody saying, hey, this thing I would like to see as part of my own quality of life, could definitely be saying, hey, I'm not getting it. So, but it definitely was kind of a snarky response, in my opinion. Number 11. Will we get composite pivot input for the radars? He basically said noted, and he put it down the list, and that was pretty much it. I think he did expand on it a little bit, but yeah, he didn't see anything wrong with it necessarily, and noted it down. Number 12. Will there be further updates to fishing? Yes, and this was discussed earlier. I believe as part of question 3? Or no, question 5, yeah, about the crowbots. So, yeah, they were talking about it there. Number 13. When will we improve the commodities and missions? Career isn't very fun. So, he did say, have a few mission updates planned, discussed some of the mission types that were there. He kind of maybe leaked animal missions, but the thing is, we've already kind of have some, like the bear and the jaguar attacks. I know I've come across those in my career modes, playing on stream. So I know that's a thing. So people I know were in the stream were like, oh, he leaked animal. I'm like, no, we've kind of already had animal missions. So, but he didn't want to commit to too many saying, hey, yes, this is a thing, this isn't a thing, because they were still planned and in the works, so, yeah. Alright, number 14. What's the next big thing or DLC coming? Well, he says he doesn't want to spill the beans too much, he doesn't want to spill the beans too much about it, but definitely referenced a few of the updates that have already been talked about in the previous questions, such as the fishing updates and some of the weapon updates that they had coming up. But he didn't really say, well, there is stuff in the works. He didn't want to really talk about what is planned. Alright, 15. Will you build expressways, motorways with multiple lengths? I believe this person was asking for something similar to like the mod that adds the highways to the location. And I think that's how he was taking it too. Because he said, not looking to add more location. Feedback generally isn't positive for this. Because generally people think there's enough locations as it is. And their last big one, they don't want to really add anything like the arid map for the time being. They might add like small little locations adjustments and such, but they're not looking at anything big. So we might see at most maybe like a house or two defining certain situations, but that's about it. Because, you know, apparently it just doesn't work out well. Or it doesn't get a lot of good feedback from it, so. Alright, number 16. Will there be more sound updates for such as jets and muffled sounds? And etc. He wasn't sure on this, because even though they did have some sound effects they had available, like, you know, some sound effects that were stashed away, sounds were difficult, because the sound resources they use to develop are kind of weird and inconsistent, where some sound libraries could be, you know, available and abundant on certain types of sounds, they would be really bad on others. And this is from the different engine noises and such, and it kind of is a very mixed bag of finding reliable sounds for this. 17. Many components are too expensive and heavy. Any chance for rebalancing? He basically said yes, there is hope for this. There is, he did say it's a task they do want to do after they get some certain things fleshed out with the missions. But they would actually like, if there is something specific you think should be changed, to add a support ticket and be specific about it. The more specific you can be, the better the help. But the thing they also want to keep in mind is that they definitely want to keep to roughly to the 1 mass to 1 block ratio. But the prices can be adjusted based on difficulty and all that, so, you know, go in there, make your voice heard if you want to change it, because I think it was a great way of dealing with it, because there's definitely certain parts that now, because like me personally, I would love to see the price change for the instrument panels, because they are, pun intended, instrumental early on for smaller creations, because, yeah, they really do help on early on, because you get like microcontrollers right away from the get-go, so why not let us have, you know, that data, being able to use instrument panels a lot earlier, because they're prohibitively expensive. You get like a dial for like $20, but you have an instrument panel for $200, and then even if you did like $20, like double the price of a regular button or slash dial, that still doesn't come to over $100 on an instrument panel. So I would love to see at least cut in half, personally. Alright, number 18. Do you plan on adding hydraulic mechanisms with dedicated fluid to control them? He wanted to. They don't have plans, and one of the problems they have with doing it is that the bullet physics engine, not literally the physics around bullets, but the engine they use, which is called Bullet, doesn't have what he said was a point-to-point constraint, which I believe means that if one point moves so much, another point at another spot, in relative to it, moves the same amount, which is what would be needed for hydraulics, at least as way they would want to do it. So he went in talking about how he understands the need for it and such, but it would require them to actually literally program the physics into the game for it. And that is a big hurdle. So, alright. Can ammo belts for guns also... Oh, can you get ammo belts for guns so they can build proper turrets? This was one that was answered in the previous Q&A, with the big thing as being that it was a physics issue. They would have to create a specifically like stiff rope type structure, and again, they would have to specifically build those physics in there. Alright, 20. It was an incomplete question, so he kind of skipped it, but I believe the person was trying to ask about cables and hoses or pulleys. So, but yeah, he pretty much skipped it because the question was incomplete. 21. Can we paint rotor blade accents like the red on the tail rotor? And he said, yeah, that is a possibility. He mentioned that how there's a bunch of, moving parts that have said, accents on them and colors. And it would be, he can understand people wanting to paint that, and he could have its uses. And it's not impossible. So, and he did note, like how, some things have like a primary mesh and the sub mesh, which you can paint on moving parts, but like the smaller stuff. So he was definitely referencing. All right. All right, 22. Chance to add more train parts. Is there a chance to add more train parts become available, such as inside cylinders and diesel cranks? He's unsure of these parts because these sound like very specific parts to diesel electric systems, and wasn't sure if they would actually add any real value of mechanics to the game. He wasn't saying that he wouldn't do it, but he did have to want to see a specific benefit to the game mechanically before he really went that far in trying to add such specific parts to the game. Alright. 23. Any plans expanding search and rescue missions and having more expansive AIs? Well, this one he said, like, they mentioned that they said that, if you have ideas for search and rescue, any, like, search and rescue, like, experience or mission type that you would like to see, to put in a support ticket. Give them the info. Try to be specific, but don't make it an essay. Try to stick to the point, but give the best details you can without going on a rant or rambling on. The idea of an interactive AI definitely doesn't feel, can be tricky, and it doesn't really fit with the flow of the game, but, he didn't exactly say no. I think most people just want to see something like a shop seller or something like that, I think. Some of that stuff's already taken care of by some add-ons on the game, but yeah. Okay, 24. Any chance for tank track rework, allowing for different size wheels in one track and possibly suspension? He said there was no plans for reworking tracks, but he did think this was a good idea to be able to have different size wheels with the tracks. So he noted it down, and they were going to look into it. This kind of comes up later again. Alright. 25. Will you ever add velocity pivots with the power fluid outputs and inputs? He went on to describe how he didn't really... There wasn't a lot of noted things in real life that had such an operation, but at the same time, he does acknowledge they have had it, but he sees the value within the game of having it. And he did note that there's probably a few places that do and don't have some sort of system like this in them, so definitely looking into it. Alright, 26. Will audio logic be updated? Possible audio synth, like from Lua and such. He doesn't think it's possible. Not impossible, but highly unlikely because the amount of data needed to handle that audio would be very large and restrictive on a creation and cause issues with the game itself as it's being spotted. Again, this isn't something I'm very familiar with either, with the audio stuff. So I can't really summarize much more than that, but I do know he was he was talking about the different hertz and waves and how much data that actually takes up within the game, and it gets big quick. So, I mean, I get where he's coming from with the sizes he was talking. So, yeah, I wouldn't look into that too much, but he definitely did say it wasn't impossible, but it would be very tricky, and probably something that would need to be looked at in the future for more relevance. Okay. 27. Would Stormworks get a VR DLC? Unlikely, as it has a small install base and it's poorly supported. He even noted that Carrier Command has a VR option, but it's constantly being broken due to changing code within the drivers and such. They wouldn't even change any codes to Carrier Command, and the game, it would just break for the players. So due to that, he's not really looking into doing possible VR. And he also mentioned motion sickness involving, being on boats and with VR. And even possibly, the fact they have to keep up certain performance levels with the headsets to help prevent motion sickness while people are wearing the headsets. So there's a lot of caveats there that they would have to make sure of, that Stormworks isn't guaranteed to be capable of managing all the time. Okay, and then here comes the famous question. Will we ever get the 2 wide small tank tracks? And again, this one confused him because we were talking about this before, and he was confused because he's didn't understand. Now, last time this question came up, I noted that it was definitely a difference in what the developer was seeing as the part and what the players were wanting for the part, and their definitions weren't meshing. And I want to say I think some people actually listened to me on that because they were actually trying to describe the difference, because finally he noticed what people were saying. There was somebody in the chat by the name of Olstu, OLSTU, finally said people 2 by 3 by 3 is what people want, not 2 by 5 by 5. He saw this comment and it finally clicked. He's like, oh, okay, so people wanted this. I'm paraphrasing, but basically he finally clicked and got and understood what people were wanting with this, because this has been wanted by people for a long time, but they keep treating it as it was we have 2 wide tracks and it's a 5 by 5s. We'd be no, we want the small, because the person did say in the question small tank tracks, and he noted that, and that was starting to get him to start to click in place. But either way, yes, Altsu, my man, you got him to click, you got him to figure it out. So maybe we might be seeing that. The thing is he's oh, well, I don't see why not. But we don't know when that'll be. Alright, number 29. Any plans to add a flow rate sensor? And any plans for dealing with the oil overheating bug? Now, he did talk about how, parts can cause a reduction of flow. So adding a flow rate sensor on the valves themselves, a data point, would be more productive. So we aren't getting a specific flow rate sensor, but maybe we'll get something on the valves themselves so that we can actually watch this, which is, thank God, please. I've been waiting for that one. However, the oil overheating bug, completely missed it. I don't think he didn't want to answer it, he just didn't remember it because of talking about the flow sensor. All right, number 30. Will pressure be fixed? Water can come in, but O2 not necessarily going out. I think this is regards to like ship sinking. I think at least this is how he went with his reaction to it. He talked about the whole length of how they had fixed pressure and the issues with the space DLC, and that the gas extractor was something they have at the speed it is because they wanted to get time for a player to react, say they open a door and such. And yeah, so there isn't any real plans to really change it at the moment. I think they need, if there's something specific, they probably need more specific examples, maybe even creations to demonstrate the issue. Will there be dual wheels added, possibly wheels with RPS outputs on both sides? In other words, dualies. He was open to it and he discussed it, but didn't want to talk about it too much because, they are talking about a wheel update already in the first place, rebalancing the wheels. But he did understand, I think he did understand that when the person said 2 RPS on both sides, I think it finally somewhat clicked with him on a way to build a dually setup with that, possibly. Okay, so, just to let you know, that this point is now 59 minutes into the stream of when they started asking questions. At least from the video that I'm referencing this from. So this is 59 minutes in. So after this point, you're looking on the second half of the video for any of the questions here. So, alright, starting with question 32. Any plans for higher precision update for guns? Yes, should be coming some point this year. So they are looking at increasing the accuracy of the weapons so they have less play, which, oh my god, I'm already... If you've been watching any of my VODs, my luck with the enemy AI, yeah, this is going to be interesting to say the least. Now, next. Will there be aerodynamic, hydrodynamic drag reworks for higher efficiency builds with lower loads on the engines? Would agree this would be something nice, but referenced how everything is made from the same set of blocks versus how real life you have different materials with different weights and such. So it's already something not very realistic, but is isn't very realistic to real life, but giving something simple. So trying to make something to that? I mean, he explained it before, but the idea is basically because we're already using an unrealistic set of blocks to create everything and match all materials, it's already kind of wonky as it is. So he doesn't want to try to break down the fundamentals of the game because it would start breaking creations. And after the Space DLC, I think they have a little bit of PTSD from from what happened with the Space DLC and breaking creations. Which, in my opinion at this point, comes out to, what's the term? I think it's like survivor bias, where you can only see the people who survive, so you can only base your information on that. In this case, the people who were only actually actively talking about it were actually getting... But it's when actually stuff happens, that's when they really got everything. They really got the information. And they don't want to go that far again. Alright, 34. When will more building blocks that people have been asking for? He just like wasn't sure what they meaning, and he just said this needs to be more specific. If you have a specific block and you have a reason you want to build it, support ticket. Send a support ticket, give a description why, and for adding a feature, and they'll probably look at it. Now, side note on this one, I was noticing in the stream chat, people were talking about the 1x1 pyramid. So, in other words, a point. And, yeah, okay. I can kind of see that one. All right, 35. Can we get pivots that move via RPS? And he was mentioning this was a great idea, and it fit in there, but at the same time, it would still have the same issues of wheels, which is there would be an issue with conservation of energy. So motion parts, there are certain parts they have, like the wheels, already have specific codes in them for handling this type of stuff, and this would have to be created for this as well. If I remember, he said he didn't think it would most likely happen, but it's not impossible. 36. Will the radar noise ever be removed? And he sits there talking about how there's already a number of people that create incredibly precise systems in the game. Hell, even I've referenced, there's this Japanese YouTube creator. He builds these insane missile systems. I don't know how to even pronounce his name. It's written in, kanji, or I don't know what it is, but it's written in Japanese. And he makes some incredibly precise missile systems. Like, it's insane. He has a reactor. He has a system that will react to a missile like within 0.8 of a second. It's like really close to the vehicle, and the missile react and actually intercept missile coming for it. Granted, the picture was it coming straight at it, so it was in the final part, but the fact is it was still reacting in that little bit of time frame, and boom, shooting the target, intercepting a missile. So I can see where this is coming from. But however, he is not gonna, the radar noise that's there is trying to add a little bit of level of something that happens in real life as things that real life systems have to overcome. So he doesn't see any need to actually remove it, since there's already people with, creating precise systems as it is. 37. Can you add a buzzer with a composite input so pitch and volume can be varied? He looked at it, he didn't see any reason to not do this, and said it was definitely possible as the data was already there, so to speak. All they have to do was add the input. Alright, let's see. 38. Any chance for any more handheld items like jerry cans or cables going through pulleys? He here kind of discussed how consuming items is different in Stormworks versus certain other games, and having how the handheld items work just is a little odd. So he's not really seeing as something like, say, a jerry can is really that necessary. So they're probably not going to add it, and that makes called adding the handheld items kind of a pain. So, it is what it is. 39. Could fishing nets be customizable? In other words, can you color the nets for decorations? He said this would be tricky. There's definitely some certain calculations and info they need to get, but not impossible. So they'll be looking into it. 40. Will resource gathering be improved, such as mining and oil drilling? He didn't see any need to really do anything, as everything has been working well as it was built. And if anybody has an issue they need or has an idea, adding a specific detail to the tracker or adding a tracker issue with specific details to help understand would go a long way. 41. Any update on the Stormworks-like game? So he went on a tangent about how he's trying to keep the game different from Stormworks, so it didn't feel like it had all the baggage from Stormworks as they were developing this new vehicle builder that's not Stormworks 2. And he was talking about how he mentioned that the game was going to handle scenarios and systems versus Stormworks, and he wants to keep Stormworks unique to Stormworks, and the new game will be unique to itself. Now, here's the thing. If you want reference to this, because if you already know, see what's happened with Kerbal Space Program 1 versus Kerbal Space Program 2. And then, as of this video I last heard, I saw things online saying KSP2 is dead. And everything's just going back to KSP1. So that's the type of baggage that I think he's trying to avoid by making this just Stormworks 2. Because he was talking about how this has been a game that's been in development for 7 years, has 7 years of baggage to it, and wants to try to catch that up in another game that'll be Stormworks 2, where people expected to have all the baggage of Stormworks. So he figured it's easier just keep playing building on Stormworks and make not Stormworks 2 its own game while handling things in a different way, in its own unique way. Alright, 42. Do you have plans to rebalance career? This was already noted that it was asked before, and basically said they are going to look into it in the future. 43. Will better performing tires be added? Probably not, and basically referenced the previous comments about wheels, especially early on in the broadcast. Will they add part deforming or detaching, say from accidents and such? Not likely, as how the game, he was talking about how the game handles calculations for buoyancy and such, how it's done like at the moment you spawn. So if you were doing this every time you deformed or broke parts off of there, it would have to recalculate the buoyancy. And it would actually, even though it'd only be like a split second or something, it would start ending up creating issues in the game performance, and then would be like, hey, why can't you smooth this out, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, it just would not work out well. Weapons get update, like barrels for more accuracy. And as he mentioned, this was already been discussed, and see question earlier, where they were talking about ammo and such. But he did say they are looking to bring in a accuracy increase in general for weapons. Update. Is there an update on the rail blocks? Now, this is what he's referring to as blocks so you could actually take like a train off the tracks and then put it on here so you can put it on another vehicle to carry it someplace. And, keep it secure. They did discuss it, but they don't have a specific answer to give. It didn't sound like they said necessarily no, but it's definitely one of those that sounds like a really tough issue. 46. Can we have an option to bump up the resolution of screens? It's not impossible, but they were worried about performance issues. Again, from having too many of these larger screens with the higher resolutions. And that's where they're kind of trying to stay away from. And I can see this because this would also end up taking like an extra hit on lower performing machines. Will there be a setting for disabling compressed gases? No, they were trying to stay away from setting dependency for creations, kind of like how they used to have, normal mode or beginner's mode, depending on how you want to talk about it. Because originally it was called normal mode, and then you had advanced mode, but now they call it simple mode, and way it is now. And those have those settings for infinite gas, infinite fuel, and all that. Or infinite fuel, infinite electric, and they want to try to stay away from adding too many more dependencies on that type of stuff. So, yeah. Will train tracks be remodeled? He didn't see any reason for making any changes to the train tracks. Because adding a higher poly count to a low poly game makes things stick out, and it just feels like you have two different artists working on the same project, and it just didn't make sense overall, and they were working overall just fine. I will admit, however, I would love to see them to fix the curve right past the shipbreaking yard, because that thing is too sharp. Alright, 49. If you could do Stormworks again, what would you change the second time around? Now, this was actually a straight up just question about how they would like to handle the game, and he said he'd like to tackle the fundamentals, but one thing he definitely wants to change, he would like to change, is the workbench. He kind of wanted to do it like, he mentioned a few games where they do it in first person, kind of like Space Engineers and even Scrap Mechanic, and the ability to build anywhere. But there was definitely, he noted that in the chat, most people actually liked the workbench, and he noted this as well, but he's like, because he said there was pros and cons to every situation, and yeah, so you'd have to take those into account either way. Okay, 50. Will the player limit be increased? No. He said the more the problem with multiplayer is vehicles than players. And adding more players to help crew vehicles would just add more issues. That pretty much summed up what he was talking about. So this is, that's a no. Will cooling and heating of compartments be a thing? And he talked about how there should be heating. Well, the thing is I remember looking at chat, there was a number of people, including PNC, I think 454 was talking about it too in the chat. They were talking about how there's no way to actually cool. There's ways to heat, but not actually cool. And I also am going to chime in on this because I made a mention in a video about how fresh water is kind of susceptible to any ambient heat when they're in any part where it can travel through as a coolant. I kind of got an answer to that from the devs, and they did not actually address the issue. They just thought I was complaining about the radiator. No. Anyways, tangent. Let's get back to the questions. Will the monitor resolution be increased? Already answered. See above. Basically. Will jet engines get more thrust? No. As the person asked, it thought it was a little underpowered. And they said, really, most of the fastest creations on the workshop generally use jets, so he didn't see any real reason to rebalance the jet engines or make any work with them. I believe he mentioned here, he was talking about how, if anything, they would have to basically deprecate the current jet engines parts and then make a whole new set to make something new that would work different. So I can see, and then that would again mess with a whole bunch of people's creations, which is a no-no. Will we ever get alternative fuel options or engines in the game? This was kind of answered in the last stream like 3 times, I think. And he's basically, his answer is the same, unless the only difference is the name of the fluid going into the engine block is just gas versus diesel. He really didn't see a need to specifically split just to add gas, to add diesel with a different name, is how he referenced it. If all we're doing is just making diesel with a different name, he didn't really see a mechanical system reason why to add it to the game. Side note, he apparently didn't know what CNG was. Which, in case you're watching, they're watching, whoever's watching, CNG is compressed natural gas. Yeah. Okay. Next. Are there any updates for the automotives, like grip of wheels? And he said, this has been already discussed. See above. He actually expanded a little bit more on it, but basically he came down and said, we've already discussed this. Will you add more ammo for light machine guns, such as for aircraft? And he talked about how there was going to be an accuracy, the buff to the weapons, but he then noted that they were talking about an increased capacity of the ammo boxes, which my little dinghy would enjoy. And we're talking about the little 50 cal type weapon that they have. I would like to see parts added to that as well. Or some way we can hook it up. Ooh, excuse me. Or some way to hook that little gun up to, like, its own drum barrel as well. Okay. 57. We're almost done. Looking at the ability to increase the dock size without messing with game files. Again, this was a no. They keep the build size as it is because any larger would affect the creations on how they would affect the game. And if they allow it to go, then people would just use it anyways, and then people would have creations that people could spawn and would be crashing games. And all they're doing is just trying to spawn something out of the workbench. So they want to try to avoid that at all possible, so it doesn't seem like they're going to be increasing the build size anytime soon. If at all. Our fishing nets testing for sales. And he was like, yeah, I can see the relation there. And he said, like, it's not impossible, but again, the same issue still apply, is having to deal with the physics of the wind hitting the sails and all of that. So, but if they want to do it, they want to be able to do it right. 59. Are the creations used in the snapshots posted anywhere? And he's like, yes, you can go to Discord, the Vehicle Showcase channel. If you want something of yours posted, you can go there and place it, or you can find the vehicle, the pictures there. 60. Would you consider adding farming? He did think it would be a good idea, and it would be something interesting, but at the same time, it would start... How many things can we add before it starts diluting the focus of Stormworks as a search and rescue? Seeing since as people just in this alone have already asked for more search and rescue missions, it's not a no, but it's not something they're going to consider right now. I could see them... Now, I could see them, like, next year, like, 2025, if it goes that far, doing farming stuff there, if they do it. Now, the real part is, like, the deformation of land and such. How would that be handled? I mean, that's one interesting, thing to think about. How the products would be picked up and all of that. Would they even have... I mean, would there be specific plots to actually put down farming? Because I know playing Hydroneer, farming was a bit of an issue in that one. Of course, a lot of people didn't end up liking it overall. It kind of was a pain to start and such, but outside of that, once you got it, it was okay. But anyways, I digress. So it's not a bad idea, but it needs work, and it's something they want to get to after they've taken care of a few other things like the search and rescue missions, which in my opinion, they need to add more search and rescue variety overall and put more meat on the bone. They have a bone right now, and it's like a little piddly chicken skin, like a little buffalo wing, and we want something that's a little bit more robust. Okay, will there be a color sensors to be used on things such as autonomous vehicles? And basically said it can't be done off the GPU. It has to be done on the CPU, which means that requires a whole set of calculations that have to be worked into the CPU for the game. And basically, it's a whole mess. Basically, you're saying it was a whole lot of work, and that was one they did not want to mess with overall. So this is not something you're going to probably see anytime soon, if ever. 62. I have a lot of ideas for career. He's like, great, open a support ticket, give us your ideas. Like mentioned, tell you what you want, but be to the point. But try to give as many details as you can, but keep it short and simple as best you can. Can we have a Doppler effect implemented? No, doesn't think that such a niche physics idea is worth including in the game because there'd be so little using it. I believe this has to do something with radar and maybe even weather and other things. So, yeah. I'm not sure on it myself completely, so I'm not going to expand more than that. But basically, yeah, he said no. It's kind of a... So the fact that he even knows about it means they already looked into it and just decided no, it wasn't worth the effort to put it in because it wouldn't add much to the game overall. Be willing to add more window models. He says, no, people want more, but the current set feels pretty much complete, and anything that's missing can be filled in with XML editing. And I kind of understand where he's come from, because there's a lot of window parts, And a lot of the things that people want is kind of, but I think they need, like, even in my opinion, they need to add, like, kind of like a set of, like, automotive windows and be willing to put things that don't seal in there, because people already know how to deal with parts that don't seal. So why not just let people deal with that? Alright. 65. Why not add blocks promised in 2018? Why haven't you added blocks that were promised in 2018 but have not been added today? And basically he said there's been a lot of Q&A streams since 2018. He may have or may not have said it. He thinks he doesn't think he has, but he said there's a possibility. But things changed. Like, they may have wanted to add them and then just couldn't feasibly put them in. And it's one of the reasons why they don't want to try to suggest things without confirmation, to just get the player base's hope up. 66. Can you add more engine sound effects like a drop-down menu? The engine sound effects... okay. And then he was talking again about how the sound effects are kind of an issue, and the resources for them are kind of, wonky and unbalanced. And he is expecting mainly, future mods can fill in the holes for these things, and that's probably where they'll be able to get them from. So yeah, that's pretty much that. I mean, there wasn't much more to expand on that, but I think that people just wanted the ability to switch, like, the sound output from an engine to something more appropriate. Just like how you can go to a buzzer and change the sound effects there. Okay, 67. Jet engines seem outdated. Will they get an overhaul? Okay, this is where I was referencing earlier. So, yeah, no, we'd have to depressurize the current engines and make a whole new set. Or just end up just breaking people's creations and upsetting the player base. So, I think a lot of people who want to see these changes and stuff are getting now really hit with the we don't want to break people's creation thing. And considering what happened with the Space DLC, it really hits hard now. Because people do see the ramifications. Because of the Space DLC, what happened when people they made a huge change like that and they completely screwed it up. They fixed, I would say, 90% of it. But they do, they even admit they screwed it up. So, and they don't want to do that again. Why did you use terms like turns, radians, and degrees? And this one was a bit of a discussion about the different types of mathematical values. It wasn't very long, but he did end up saying he didn't want the game to be too mathy, but he did want to use terms that were used, and at the time they were implemented, those were the things that kind of made sense, because you had like a throttle that went to 0, -1 to 1, just as a steering wheel went from 1 to -1. So there was a lot of things that overlapped in there, and that's how they did them when they started. He did mention, that radians are kind of a very heavy math thing. One step from college level, I think is how he meant to try to put it. That was my interpretation of it. But yeah, however, he does want to value consistency over more than a specific value. So they're trying to stick to one if possible, which I think is terms. Could you have a composite on the net acres? Basically noted down and said they would discuss it. And that was pretty much about it. Will you implement Linux dedicated support in Stormworks? He said, will not. They already have compatibility issues on certain platforms as it is. He was referring to how there were certain AMD drivers would break, and they're not doing anything to change the code. It's just the AMD or Intel would change drivers, or Nvidia would just change drivers, and it would just break stuff. And since they're using OpenGL, they're not even looking at working on Mac anymore because of that. Because Mac has been having issues with supporting OpenGL as it is. It's an old API. All right, home stretch. Will the 71, will the game get low-end computer support? He thinks it does, and they haven't changed the minimum spec requirements of the game in a long time. And he thinks most of the people that refer to the low-end support are these low-end, low-power laptops that have like these abilities to like burst up a certain amount of power a little bit. But frankly, people play on these and they tend to have issues. So he thinks most of that comes from there as a possibility. But as it stands, he thinks that the game is, its specs and all that is quite compatible with there. Just got to be careful of the creation they're spawning. Alright, last question, number 72. Possibly you will add handheld end effectors for logic similar to keypads and such. This one, I wasn't even completely clear what this person was asking for. Like some way of adding an input into a keypad from range or something? I'm not sure. But basically he reiterated again that he didn't want to really add handheld items unless necessary because they're just, frankly, a pain to get right. So, okay. Alrighty, so that whole time we were sitting there, I was just running around with the fishing net. Doesn't look like caught very much, even though I was at a fishing hole, especially a snook hotspot. They normally towards the surface. Anyways. But yeah, that was basically it. It's about 72 questions. All focused on, various things. I thought there was actually a pretty good variety of questions this time. We had very few repeats, and it wasn't a lot of the typical, can you fix multiplayer stuff? I don't know if you specifically actually shadow dodged those questions, but hey. If he did, he did. He didn't, he didn't. And I'm not saying that was a specific question. I'm just saying it's possible. I don't think he did, because the way he's going. I think he was trying to get as many questions as he could done, which means you have to actually think about that. But either way, I digress. Yes. So, I think there's a lot of good hope in those questions. I definitely would like to see some answers. I want to try to get in on them next time myself. I kind of missed it because I was tired and exhausted, and I had to sleep. Thus, I missed it. I wish I could have been there for more. But, so, yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. I hope some of this summary helps you out. And I managed to shorten it by half. Because it was a 2-hour stream, and it's about an hour long to cover all those questions, so. What the fuck just happened to my book? Anyways, it is what it is. I'm still working the kinks out on it. So, anyways. So, yeah. Yeah, overall, I mean, like I said, there was a lot of good questions. Definitely got some interesting answers. Yeah, pretty much. So, alright. So, I hope you had a good time. Hope you enjoyed your watch. If you do, you know the deal. You know the spiel. This is Arcades, signing out. Have yourself a good day. Whee!